All right, call the meeting to order. Let's start with Pledge of Allegiance and invocation by Mr. Odell, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
O God, source of all wisdom and strength, you have entrusted us with the duty to serve others. Grant us the grace to do so with clarity, courage, and peace. Holy Spirit, guide our thoughts and words. Bless all those present. We place this meeting in your hands, trusting in Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
All right, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lowndes? Commissioner Lowndes?
Here.
Commissioner Bradley?
Here.
Commissioner Odell?
Here.
Commissioner Anise?
Here, ma'am.
Commissioner Gettler?
Here.
Chair Benner?
Here. All right, perfect. And do we have any announcements from anybody or disclosures from anybody? I spoke to one of the commissioners on this. We need to disclose that. We don't have any minutes from any of the prior meetings. This is a public hearing. If anybody has any general public comment that is not directly related to any of the agenda items, now's your time to come up and address the board. Seeing none, we'll close public comment and go to 9A.
All right. Thank you and good evening, Chair Benner and Commissioners. Ben Balser, Planning and Development Services Director, for the record. First off, I wanted to thank you all for convening on a Wednesday, a day early, and we'll see you again tomorrow. But tonight we're here to present the evaluation, appraisal, and review or EAR-based amendments of the county's comprehensive plan. This is a process that we're required by statute to undertake every 7 years. It includes a review of the comprehensive plan to ensure that it is consistent with state statute. We've gone through this joint effort with many county departments, and several department directors and county staff are here tonight if you have any questions that may come up after the presentation. This evening, I'd like to introduce Amy Dinter and David Dixon. They are both planners with the Calvin Giordano and Associates firm. That's a county's planning consultant. They will present the information before you this evening, and they'll focus on each element of the comprehensive plan, and they will note the changes that we believe are the most notable, I guess, in each element. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Amy.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I would also like to thank you all, commissioners, for having this special meeting for us tonight, and so we can discuss the comprehensive plan evaluation and appraisal review amendments. So comprehensive plans fall under the provision of the Community Planning Act. This act directs local governments to create and update comprehensive plans. Local government, through the comprehensive plan, has a duty and responsibility to direct their land development regulations in a publicly available manner, and the application being sensitive to private property rights. The Community Planning Act requires all Florida local governments to adopt a comprehensive plan with 10 required elements, which we do have them on the screen. We have future land use, transportation, infrastructure, capital improvement, conservation, recreation and open space, housing, coastal management, intergovernmental coordination, and property rights. Comprehensive plans are important because they are a community's vision of development through a policy framework that guides land use development decisions and utilize the power of local government to guide and manage future development in a manner that stays true to a community's vision. What is included in a comprehensive plan? The first part, we have goals, objectives, and policies. This is the policy framework. They set the future development vision of the county and identify the improvements needed to maintain level of service for infrastructure like roads, sewer, potable water, public school facilities, excuse me, recreation, and open space and drainage. The other part of the comprehensive plan are the data and analysis. This is important to the goals, objectives, and policies because the analysis supports and informs them. The data is analyzed from plans, studies, most recent demographical and housing information from Bureau of Economic and Business Research, U.S. Census, their American Community Survey, which are 5-year estimates, and they are released annually. The DIAs also identify key data points and trends that help to formulate new policies and assess the existing conditions and identify the need for future development and redevelopment. The time frame for the evaluation and appraisal review of the comp plan is required every 7 years. Local government will review the plan to determine if an update is required. If the need is identified, a letter must be prepared and transmitted to the state of Florida's Department of Commerce, and the amendments to the comp plan must be transmitted within 1 year from the date the Department of Commerce received the letter. If the time frame is not met, the county cannot initiate or adopt any publicly initiated plan amendments. However, a developer or resident can initiate amendments to the plan or land use map. After the first reading by the Board of County Commission and after any changes are made, the county will send the comp plan to Florida State Department of Commerce. The department will send back an objections, recommendations, and comments report. The county will have 180 days from the date of receipt of that letter to address the issues in the report and send back to the state for final approval and move to the second reading for adoption.
Good evening, members of the Commission. I'm Dave Dixon, Calvin Giordano, helping Amy on this project. Before going to statutory changes, just really want to point out that this comp plan and particularly its goals, objectives, and policies really are the policy framework that you stand on as planning and zoning commissioners and your staff stands on to make recommendations about all future decisions. It really is. It's what you make your findings of fact on. The staff makes those in staff reports, and you have to be consistent. Everything has to be consistent with those policies that are adopted in the goals, objectives, and policies, or GOPs. Which is why it's important to note that the state did make some changes this year. You can see the list here on slide 7, one of the most important of which is that very bottom one that says SB 180. This was in response to emergency declarations made for at least two of the hurricanes last year, and it prevents local jurisdictions from adopting any land use code or comprehensive plan policies that are more burdensome or restrictive. So that's to say that this update really is just an update to be in conformance with state statute and to update outdated terms and things throughout all 10 of the elements that are on this. So this slide is here just to notice that this meeting was properly noticed per all applicable statutes. As Amy mentioned, there's GOPs and there's DIA, the data inventory analysis. All the goals, objectives, and policies that were updated were to meet statute. That's what you will formally adopt. All of the GOPs have to be based on updated data. That's the key. There has to be a connection from the data if there's a data change to a policy, should it be new or changed. It's a 10-year planning timeline, 10 and 20, but 10 years is an important planning timeline for this. We've used consistent data throughout for the DIA to make sure that those GOPs, those policies are based on the most current data. There's 10 elements. Again, as Amy mentioned, we have a couple highlighted in blue here. These are just to say that we have all the ones that the state requires, but there are things that your community members have pointed out as important. And that's the port and some of these other ones listed here. So that's kind of unique. It's important to have policies that are unique to your community and the vision that they have. Future land use is the first update we'll go through. We'll have a lot of underlined and struck through language on the screen here. We're just going to point out to some of the ones that are notable for this discussion. Future land use, again, it's based on the latest data on projections. How is your county growing? How is it growing? Where is it going? Right? A lot of your facilities and infrastructure are based on those population projections, and the future land use is really where all that stuff hits the ground. Part of that, a big part of this element is that urban service boundary. discussion and the analysis that was done to see what's the lay of the land for 10-year and 20-year growth projections. We'll talk about that in just a second. So on the right side of the screen here, 1115, 1116, this is to ensure that if during mandatory structural inspections, if a complex has to be rebuilt, that the owner of that is entitled to the density that they had. They're entitled to their one unit no matter what happens. Following with 1116, which is where if a unit is destroyed or if a complex is destroyed by a storm, that owner is entitled to that unit. 1118 is about the MXD land use designation and having a bonus for developments that occur within that have, is it 10% bonus for a number of criteria, one of which is it has to be 10% AMI. The income limit is 100% of AMI or less area median income within a 3-mile radius to a major employment center, and it must be deed restricted for 50 years, and then you get the bonus. Let's see, go to the next one here. So a lot of this is just to be in compliance with state statute, and this one, 11611, is the same thing to protect natural gas facilities. Finally, for future land use, the urban service boundary analysis. So this, very simply stated, says considering available lands within the current urban service boundary, based on moderate range projections, that land is able to accommodate more than 10 years of growth within the urban service boundary. If you were to look at areas outside into previously identified expansion areas from the last comp plan, that could handle the 20-year growth and then some in those previously designated areas.
Okay, so after future land use, we have the transportation updates. Most of these were made to incorporate data and information from the long-range Smart Moves 2045 plan from your transportation planning organization, and also the multimodal transportation system plan. So the county is shifting from impact fees to multimodal impact fees. And that's what a lot of this transportation updates were pertaining to. They were made to protect the right-of-way and address flood risk. And the next couple slides, also similar to the future land use, we're going to show you some of those examples of the changes that were made. So you can see in policy 2123, St. Lucie County shall designate and protect transportation corridors with a right-of-way protection plan to assist in mitigating traffic congestion, overcrowding on the county road system. So that was one example of some of the transportation updates that we've done. Again, we have some more updates here, just showing that your cooperation with Florida Department of Transportation. We also have the port sub element. This is one of your very specific elements to your community. And most of the updates pertain to the director of the port to monitor state plans and work with Florida Department of Transportation, Florida Fish Wildlife Conservation Commission, U.S. Coast Guard, and other law enforcement agencies. There's also policies targeting derelict vessels. The housing updates incorporate the goals and strategies that were established in the Housing Needs Assessment and Implementation Plan that was completed in June of 2024. These goals are focused on supporting housing initiatives, increasing supply and diversity of housing units, and improving housing affordability. As you can see in policy 3211, this one directly relates to that housing implementation plan, giving the goals and the strategies of how the county can increase the diversity of units and affordability in the county. The infrastructure updates, they are focused on maintaining or increasing levels of service for water, sewer, stormwater management, and roads. This ties into future land use as well, and those population projections. And so we have, again, examples of some of these policies that we updated. In the coastal management updates, the recent vulnerability assessment conducted by the county is included in the policies to provide data and information regarding flood risk. The updates also address state statutes that need to be implemented in the plan. There is new policy 51711. I think that was on the, oops, sorry, there it is, down here at the bottom right. This particular policy supports public boat ramps and parking facilities. And 51713, if the county would like to discuss a mooring field, there is a list of a list of considerations, which you can see here on the bottom left. Your conservation updates were mainly just updating policies and plans, and 614.2D, allowing a wetland waiver for access limited to a 1/4 acre of impact. I'm sorry, wetlands access. Recreation and open space, these updates pertain to level of service and sensitive land acquisition to conserve natural resources in the county. The intergovernmental coordination updates, these are policies supporting the county's intergovernmental coordination. Some examples of the agencies that this element supports is coordination with FDOT, TPO, City of Fort Pierce, Port St. Lucie, Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, and the South Florida Water Management District. Capital improvements updates. A lot of this particular element is looking at the updates to the county's capital improvements plan. Sorry, my mind went blank for a minute. And they include levels of service and resiliency assessment for all new development. And most of the tables all are relating to the capital improvement plan for the fiscal year 2025 through fiscal year 2029. Economic development. These policies are focusing on strengthening the county's competitive advantage and recruitment of corporations to the region, and also strengthening existing businesses. There's policies also supporting expansion of the port and supporting economic growth with performance-based incentives with clear metrics, which you can see in policy 10224. The TVC updates, which is an element that is also very particular to your county. These updates mostly focused on updating text and map changes regarding future street networks and the general retail development plan. And on this page, or on this slide, you can see two different maps. And on the left side, the new north flyover. This is the change that they did on the right, where they brought it over and made it look more, resemble what it actually looks like on the ground. On this slide, on the right is the outdated map, where in the middle there's a highlighted green area. There's kind of a cross, And if you look on the other side of the screen on the left, you'll see where that was taken out. And again, that is the new update and the map for the TBC. Public school facilities update, focusing on the interlocal agreement, making sure the existing interlocal agreement, making sure it's consistent. And then there were no changes to the rural land stewardship area or the private property rights element. There is a map series with the comprehensive plan. Your comp plan consists of 26 maps. All maps have been updated with the most recent information and data. On this slide are examples of the 2025 FEMA flood zones. In the middle, you have the urban service boundary, and on the right, you have the future number of lanes in 2045. Future land use, transportation, infrastructure, and coastal management are the elements with the most maps, and these maps are required by law to be included in the comprehensive plan. The staff does recommend the Planning and Zoning Commission to recommend approval to transmit the EAR to state and local planning agencies and other state reviewing agencies.
And I just wanted to recap, commissioners, that this is a process that we have to do every 7 years. It is required by statute. The county did notify the State Land Planning Agency, the Department of Commerce, last September, that we were undertaking our year evaluation and updating our comprehensive plan based on the updated data and analysis and updating our policies accordingly with state statute changes. We have until the end of September for the board to hear this item and to transmit to the State Land Planning Agency for their review. After their review, they will send us a report. They'll come back with any changes that we have to address, and then it'll go to the board for an adoption hearing. But if we don't get that transmittal done before September 30th, it does tie the county's hands and limits our ability to change any comprehensive plan item. Private developers can still process comprehensive plan amendments, but the county would be limited in what it can do with our comprehensive plan if we don't get our transmittal to the state for their review by September 30th. So I just wanted to wrap up with that and see if you all had any questions on any particular item. We do have the individual items on the desktop, so we can pull up specific policies if during your review you had a question on any one of them. We're more than happy to answer why things were added, why things were deleted, and with that, I'll take any questions.
All right, thank you guys very much. Do we have any questions for staff from the board? Mr. Lowndes.
We're going to absorb all this tonight?
Repeat that, sir.
We're going to absorb all of this tonight?
That is why, Chair Benner, Commissioner Lowndes, that is why this is the only thing on the agenda. That's why we have a special meeting.
The changes in the presentation, are they changes made by the county or the state?
So Commissioner Lowndes, the majority of the changes are required by, or statutory updates that we're looking to change our comprehensive plan to be in line with state law. There's a lot of naming conventions that have changed in the last 8 or 7 years since we've changed or gone through this EAR evaluation in 2018. A lot of things have changed since then. A lot of the changes that you see that are underlined within each element address what the county is currently doing. Let's say we put in things like breadcrumbs about derelict vessels or water quality improvements, stormwater treatment areas out in our agricultural lands, those sorts of things that we're looking to back up through policy that the county has already identified as a goal of itself, and we're looking to have that, I would say, teeth and backup in our comprehensive plan.
So in many cases, we are already up to date or ahead of the provisions that the state is mandating that we have to change?
There are some things that we've been proactive in addressing, but the EAR looks at the entirety of everything that has changed in the last 7 years And it's that one-time look at every single element where we have to update in accordance with statutory changes. Let's say the state adopted, something in infrastructure that we have to plan for, or solid waste levels of service. We have to account for that and change our written policies within our goals, objectives, and policies to match state statute.
Some of the things that the board has asked to consider on, I don't know where it fits into the numbers. We have asked and suggested that we look at eliminating or altering the amount of open space that a developer can take for lakes, ponds, and rivers and such have you. Is that part of this change?
So Commissioner Lowndes, that would be and currently that is in our land development regulations, our land development code, which looks to implement the policies within our comprehensive plan. The policies, or the comprehensive plan, is an overarching, basically a visioning document that is how the county is going to continue to grow. It lays out policies for infrastructure, stormwater, future land use, all of those required elements, right? And then you have your land development code regulations that look to implement those policies, how you actually get the results and get to where your community wants to be. So this doesn't look to that granular level of open space for each individual PUD that comes in. This just says like the county shall promote planned developments that have a variety of amenities and use types and mixture of uses and that sort
But
of
the
thing.
state doesn't come back and pick the changes that we make in the land development use. It's just all based on what we do here.
Correct.
Thank you.
I got a question. So if this is the community's vision, is it staff and departments that set the vision, or where did the community set this vision and like growth and densities? Because we're like, for example, like Martin and Indian River County have almost half the population per square mile that St. Lucie County does, right? So a lot of the talk is like we got to project for future growth, but where did, I mean, I've lived here my whole life basically. I've never been involved in any conversations or seen how the communities help set the vision for growth. And do we want to be 9 people per square mile like a Broward County, or do we want to like lower it, things like that? So how does the community set the comp vision for growth and densities and all that? Or is it just done by staff at the county level? And
Chair Benner, members of the commission, to provide some guidance. The county's comprehensive plan was enacted in 1990, and that exercise was quite the undertaking. That was a custom crafted, very extensive, long process in which they were accounting for pre-existing uses of land across the county, looking at established infrastructure, what likely infrastructure would be needed, and they were establishing the basis for certain land use categories, mapping out things like the rural agricultural areas, commercial, industrial, and considering balances of land uses for compatibility. Over time, there's been a lot of progression in that. Adoption of the TVC, land use amendments that have been before the Planning and Zoning Commission over decades, and it's incrementally changed to accommodate growth or employment needs or new interchanges being considered, particularly growth in Port St. Lucie. And so the community's vision, and this is a culmination essentially of almost 3.5 decades of policy revisions, those master goals of what do we want to be as St. Lucie County, those objectives, setting more of the stage, and then those intricate policies that are refined, of course, over time. This body has participated in some of that refinement to where I think the substantive changes that would alter the course of vision aren't presented as part of this year. The majority of the changes are guidance that the state has required for protection of property rights, accommodating for updates in market trends or policy trends across the state of Florida, resiliency, and you name it, to where I don't think this deviates or alters the core principles of the community's vision. However, it looks to augment that, and we know the Land Development Code is the implementation on a daily basis with permits and development applications, to where I think when we talk about growth and shifts and changes, when we had the discussions regarding the urban service boundary, when we hear future land use map amendments, that's definitely the next piece to the puzzle. With this amendment, we're not looking to modify density allocations for the residential urban or the maximum for the MXD. Yes, there's some provisions for density bonuses for affordable housing incentives and some of those micro level components, but we're not looking to take this section of the county and change the land use pattern with this year. That's currently part of the playbook or the guidebook, and modifications. For instance, if we had members of the public here this evening saying, we want to start lowering or dramatically adjusting densities, that would be altering property rights, and that would be potentially in conflict with adopted statutes and more recent policy. We're not at the table proposing those changes this evening, but refining some of the guidance. So when we do have proposals for future land use map amendments, we can continue to consult that guidebook, make informed decisions as to how it aligns with our community's vision that's been molded and refined over 3.5 decades.
So that basically, I just wondered, like, how would I answer somebody from the public? It'd be basically, we're running off the 1990 comp plan and any changes that were made. But if there would, and we can't really make, you can't make anything that's restricted because of the thing with the hurricanes. But essentially, if the county, I mean, most of those people in 1990 probably aren't around anymore, except Mr. Lowndes. But, so in other words, everybody that's moved to this area and stuff and seen it grow as much as it is, really, unless there's major changes to the comp plan outside of that hurricane window, like, it's just, we're just filling in the blanks or filling in the holes filling in the plan that created back in 1990, other than minor changes that individual, amendments.
And Chairman, I think there have been substantial changes over time. I mean, the TVC was certainly a notable undertaking. The urban service boundary, significant change, but a lot of that was in direct response to some of the progression of the city of Port St. Lucie and how they grew into our western boundary between the city. But again, this evening, we're not recharting the adopted vision or the prescribed vision. It's making some refinements, providing clarifications. It's also setting certain standards of actions that we're going to take over the short-term horizon to make sure that we continue to prioritize infrastructure, look at capital improvements, enhance employment, how we continue to partner with state and local agencies for Port-a-Fort piers, for jobs corridors for TSERTA and those areas. But it's not opening up the door for significant changes in our land use patterns.
Right. And since none of these changes can restrict anything, would the policy 1118 for the MXD increasing density by 10%, is that complying with something from the state, or are we just adding that in there at the county level?
We're looking to, Chair Benner, we're looking to add that in from the county level. We're trying to expand the variety of housing types, and it's written in such a way, if you do read that policy, it's not an automatic density bonus. It's something that the Board of County Commissioners has the ability to provide a developer should they meet those criteria or not. It's really up to the board. It's just another tool in the toolbox to promote affordable housing. We know that that's an issue in our community, and it's something that we were proactive and put in there.
And then one more thing. So when the data and everything is done and it's about providing affordability, the county, all they can do is either is affordability achieved by increasing housing units, or is affordability measured by increasing wages? Like, what is the metric when you guys say that it's to create affordable housing? how? Because you guys can't manipulate the market other than increasing either the number of units and density, which would set, higher supply, it can bring prices down, right? Or is affordability by attracting higher wage jobs that can actually afford the prices of homes?
Chair Benner, members of the commission, I think it's a little bit of both. The adopted policies, some of the enhancements to those continue to emphasize targeted industry, a diversified economy, expediting speed to market for those employers that fit our community, and we are utilizing available infrastructure. But also, as you noted, where certain metrics are made, where developments are committing to providing levels of affordable housing, the county is offering some opportunities to help facilitate that, but in strategic areas. Areas that when we're looking at plans, they're adjacent to public facilities, they're accessible to commercial, retail and services, and in those intricate areas that are assigned MXD more specific provisions, as opposed to saying, let's go grab a green field and create a community and incentivize a density outside of an urban service boundary, for that matter.
So other than like an affordable rental, is this going to dictate what a plan to be considered affordable? This is establishing what data is going to be looked at by staff to say, all right, this is affordable housing and not. My point is this: the slides you guys put up there about the median household income of $66,000 can't even afford a $300,000 house in St. Lucie County, and we pretty much don't have, no builders building those. So 50%, that's the middle 50% income. That's not average. So 50% and less of the people that have household income in St. Lucie County can't even afford a $300,000 house. So when affordability is being assessed, that's my question is what I want to know is how are you guys assessing it? Because doing, income-based rentals, that's only for so many years, and then that sunsets. And then we get phone calls from people that their rent's going up and they got to move, and then they find out every other affordable housing project's got a 2-year wait, type of thing. So my question is what is going to assess that affordability issue?
What affordable housing projects are you talking about? Because
I know that's what I'm trying to say. So what is what data set is assessing affordable?
I just want to know where we went wrong, because no offense to anybody, and go with what you said, everything you all just said, I'm wondering what year we went wrong, because they don't come here, they don't try to bring jobs. These developers stand in front of us, and we go on to the affordability thing for a minute. There's nothing affordable. I've sat here till they finally get their attorney to come up and shut me up, or attempt to shut me up. Nobody has an answer, and to give them more density, a bonus density, they're just going to turn that around on us some way. They're going to figure a way to turn it around on us. And I've said before 100 times, don't buy the land if it doesn't work your numbers. If anything, we should take 10% away from them. I don't think just offering more and more units. That's just, I can go on for an hour about it, but we went wrong somewhere, really wrong.
Hi, good evening, Commission. My name is Jennifer Hance. I'm the Director for Community Services, and we one of our divisions is the Housing Division. I wanted to mention something about the density bonuses related to affordable and workforce housing. So typically when a developer is proposing a plan unit development, and either we or the developer is offering to put some workforce housing units in there, and typically when we're looking at workforce housing, we're looking for households that are anywhere from 80% of the area median income to 120% of the area median income. And we're talking about our firefighters and our teachers, nurses, our essential service personnel really in the county. And so a incentive to the developer for providing those units is to give them some density bonuses. So it offsets their cost of selling those units at a lower price. Then they're able to recoup their costs. Per Florida statute, we are not allowed to not make developers whole in exchange for providing workforce or affordable housing units. So it's kind of a trade-off. We'll give you those densities if you include workforce or affordable units in your development to be sold to people that or households that meet that those income thresholds.
Did we track any of that to see that, are they selling them at lower prices to that income group?
So typically, when a house is set aside for affordable housing or workforce housing, it comes with a deed restriction so that for a certain period of years, and that period is to be agreed upon between the developer and the county. It could be 15 years, it could be 25 years, it could be in perpetuity, it just depends. So that comes with a deed restriction for that many years. So it has to be sold moving forward to a family that meets those income requirements for however long that deed restriction is.
But is it actually resulting in lower, more affordable sales prices?
Yes, it would have to do that. It would have to do that. It would
But
have to meet.
Do we have data that backs that up, or is that just assuming that the policy as written is actually performing that way?
So if a developer were to provide that, there would be controls in place where the county would verify the income, or there would be some mechanism where the county would verify that that property was sold to a family that met those income requirements.
But the income requirements doesn't necessarily mean lower sales prices.
You
You
said
said that the incentive is that it would be sold for a lower price.
It would have to go hand in hand, because typically when a lender is underwriting a property, they're looking to make sure that the household, the payment for the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance isn't more than 30% of the household's gross monthly income. So they would have to sell the property at a price where the homeowner could afford 30% of their gross monthly income towards their principal, interest, taxes, and insurance.
And we have, in the last, like, say, 5 years, we've had those.
We haven't had any yet, but Oak Ridge Ranch committed to 400 workforce units to be included in that development.
And they're going to be for sale, not for rent?
Correct.
So that'll basically be our first test case out there.
Correct.
400 out of how many units of that site plan?
It was a maximum of 8,600 units. The current site plan trends are in the 6,000 unit range.
So we have 400, correct, out of at least 6,000? You kind of see where we went wrong, right? There's more people that are in this workforce, right, than we're giving account for. And you're not going to sit here and tell me that our workforce isn't struggling. And I think you answered one of my questions. In the last 5 years, we haven't had any. You can run a mathematical for me real quick on that, what that payment would be. But I think every developer in here is north of 300, 350,000, even with their townhomes that are affordable, right? So now we want to give them more units. I think they need to come and sit in these more plans with us, because it's not what our citizens need. Who cares about more units? We just gave them over 6,000 and they gave us 400. We're not shaking on the same ball field here.
So that's a totally different type of project that we're looking
course.
at, right? We can't force private developers that are for-profit businesses to create affordable housing, right? This right here, you just said that there is an issue with the number of affordable units in St. Lucie County. This is a tool to promote affordable housing in St. Lucie County, so I don't see what the issue is with this particular policy.
I think the issue is it's not A, state regulated, right? And B, these are going to be the same ball players that are playing with Oak Ridge and Tidewaters, correct? I mean,
No, you're not correct.
They're not the same ball
So
players?
if you read the policy, it strictly states in there that the housing within the mixed-use development cannot be, or has to be, without market rate dwelling units. So these are affordable communities. This isn't a mixture of different income levels. This is simply an affordable housing.
Standalone community.
Yeah,
And we haven't had any of those in 5 years.
not in unincorporated county.
And the only way to verify that is to make sure that there's a lender involved. I mean, what if they lend, give them the unit and give them a mortgage themselves, and they don't have to go through a lender, and you're not worried about, standard, 30% income. Like, they could just give them a mortgage themselves and run it out for 50 years, and that's really not that affordable for them.
Good evening, Maite Santa Maria, Deputy County Administrator. I almost said the wrong title. These items, we haven't had any here, but I have worked in a community before where we did have the deed restriction units, and there's actually a mechanism for tracking them. So you actually have the deed restriction that goes into the property file. It is recorded, it comes up in all your title searches, it comes in your lending documents and everything else, and then there's reporting requirements to the jurisdiction or to the potential grantee if they're getting tax credits or other things, where you have to report who's in that unit, what you sold it for, what their income is. There is checks and balances. Usually it's about every year if it's a rental, and if it's in the homeownership program, it's every time that it turns over. So there are checks and balances to ensure that those units that you've created for affordability stay affordable. Some of the state programs only require a deed restriction, sometimes as low as 10 years, sometimes 30 years. If you can look in this policy, we put 50 years. So we tried to put a higher standard that if you get the opportunity to get this incentive, you are going to dedicate those units for a longer period of time so that we ensure that workforce continues to have that opportunity.
And it's based on household income, not just the qualifying borrower's income. So if I have a 20-year-old kid at home and 2 working adults, it's the whole household income.
Correct. So it depends on where you're getting your funding. So there might be some other state standards or federal standards, depending if you got some HUD bonus or anything else, but you're going to be looking at the household income for those units. And the units are defined by the state in terms of affordable housing, the various income brackets, and then it'll be that income as a whole.
Who's double checking everything like you were talking about that's making sure that the...
So it would be our community services
Okay.
department would be helping us with that.
Gotcha.
And is it just checked when the property transfers? Because like I buy an affordable house, I got 3 teenagers, they all get jobs. I could have $200,000 worth of household income coming into that project that was meant for affordable housing.
Usually
see
for
how it
home-
can be for 50. It can be abused very quick, and then they got in, and they kept that house, and then in 50 years they're going to sell it for a windfall and they were sitting there making $200,000 in household income, and it defeats the whole purpose of the project.
It is hard because you can't, once the person is in there and they own the unit, it's hard to check them like every year. If it's a rental, which this might actually result in more rental units and not necessarily just the sale units, because you can get more incentives for the rental units from the state, it would be checked every year, and every time the unit changes. Typically for the home ownership, it's when the exchange happens.
Chair Benner, members of the commission, I'm going to reiterate the scope of this policy and the details. Specifically MXD, there's provisions of proximity to employment, and if we think about our standard density tiers of a mixed-use project, which are usually 5, 9, and 15, 10% can become is relatively a nominal amount. Less than half unit at 5 units per acre, not even a full unit per acre add-on for 9, and then 1.5 or 15 dwelling unit per acre MXDs. In contrast, the city of Fort Pierce, yes, an urban area, a different context, their density bonus provisions are up to 5 dwelling units per acre if you're within a quarter of a mile of a transit station or stop, to where it's a much higher density bonus, not tied necessarily to affordable housing. So this I would emphasize is a very modest incentive.
So let me make sure I'm on the same page. This is specifically just for one single project that's supposed to be affordable, and we're going to offer a bonus, correct? Is basically what we're saying?
The board would have the authority to give the developer a density bonus if they hit those markers within this policy.
So it's not signed in law.
No.
Basically,
this is just an option.
Yeah. So if somebody actually came forward and said, I really want to do this, which we haven't seen in 5 years, I mean, I wish we'd see more of it. I think we all recognize we need it. It's just finding a way to just get them to want to do it instead of just building everything for profit, but not for our citizens.
In many instances, it is density bonuses because you want that economy of scale when you're building those units, because you're renting or selling them for such a lower amount. And a lot of communities will do up to 25% density bonuses. We wanted to start with something modest. We knew it would be a new and novel idea. It is simply a tool. If the board or you choose to recommend not to include it, that is okay as well. But we need to find ways to incentivize people to build these units, because if not, you'll never get them, and you'll continue to squeeze out your workforce.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I just don't know if 10% is going to help them go away from big money projects to go to this. I mean, unless we get stronger in certain areas and give a little bit of, workforce complex.
And since this is new and novel, I would like to see it recommended that if you're going to do this incentive, you need unanimous vote from the county commissioners. Unanimous, got to be everybody votes for it.
And can the commission put more teeth to this? I mean, is there additional things that it could add to this policy during this process of
Sure,
negotiating the bonus?
And you can recommend additional provisions as well.
Okay.
In your experience, have you seen any other additional provisions that other places have done?
I've seen much higher density bonuses. I've seen some incentives to waive impact fees. I've seen incentives to provide infrastructure. I've seen incentives where it's a 99-year deed restriction and not a 50-year to ensure longer-term affordability. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Those are the main ones.
Any tax abatement?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good question, and that makes you wonder, like, how do you start pulling away from those other apartment complexes? You get, I mean, to go with that, with what you're saying, right? They've offered 99, whatever. I mean, did they, on the other hand, did they have really tighter restrictions on if they wanted to build an apartment complex and not affordable?
So they didn't get the bonus unless they were fully workforce or affordable housing. And actually, there was another one. My last community required that 25% of the units was 60% area median income, 25% 80, 25% 100, and then 25% 120%. So you had that mix of units within
Right.
the complex so that people could also grow within it if they had to.
You know what I'm saying? How do you kind of divert them to kind of say, I'm not going to take my money and put it in this apartment complex I can do what I want with, and go and say I'm going to be a affordable housing complex?
So
Because obviously what we've done in 5 years plus hasn't worked. Right?
So it's typically the incentives to try to get them to go to that side. And once they do that, then there's state programs where they can get tax credits and so forth to help fund it, and they can reduce their costs that way. But if they're not proposing it, they can't get those incentives from the state either.
But my question is, on the other tier of that, is it harder for them in those areas, counties, cities, whatever it's in, harder for them to get the other complexes through? Is it more incentive for them to go through affordable housing, maybe fast track, permitting process, things like that? Or is it, because it comes down to dollars with them, right? It's what it is.
It's definitely dollars.
Right. So if it's harder for them or longer term for them, is it better for them to go to affordable housing?
So most communities do expedited permitting. Actually, we're required to do it now if you're affordable housing. So you get that already, and we already have that provision. It's, again, to get them off the traditional zoning and the multifamily or the units, you have to provide them an incentive to bring them over. 99% of the time, it's density, because the more units they can build, the more money they can save in that overall complex. They're pouring one set of walls, they're doing whatever, they're reducing their parking. You have to get an incentive for them to come that way.
So if we take the 10% and make it a bonus, can that 10% on a, like Larry said, on a unanimous decision from the commissioners, it could go 15%, it could go 20%?
Yeah, absolutely. You can recommend that.
Have you ever seen where, because you guys put in there 50 years, maybe doing a tiered percentage based on if they want to offer longer, like if they want to do 99 years, maybe offer a higher percentage and do, like, it's if the baseline's 10% at 50 years, they do 75 or 99 years, do like a 15 or 20%. And does it restrict it to the higher density areas, like the up by Colbergard, how that's like 9 units there? Like this all would pretty much be in those higher density areas. We're not going to see this come on Angle Road right next to RS, and then somebody, like, can this be abused by putting it in areas where we don't want the high density housing by putting this in there?
So Chair Benner, members of the commission, it's limited to the MXD land use designation, which is applied in a select fashion. Now, there are long-standing MXDs that have been around our interchanges and potential interchanges like the I-95 airport connector. From a tangible example standpoint, a project that comes to mind, you mentioned Angle Road. Years ago, the board adopted a land use amendment for KRE, and that included assignment of industrial and commercial and residential land uses south of Angle but east of Kings Highway to support the synergies from an employment hub, commercial services and retail, as well as workforce housing integrated to that. Nothing's been developed, but it pre-exists. It exists now. It's west of Eagle Bend. That MXD, which contains provisions for residential development up to 15 units per acre via a PUD, so it prescribes that ability to review open space, design, architectural components where it's a multifamily complex, parking, you name it. That could be a project that pursues this 10% bonus. You go up to 16.5 dwelling units per acre where they're meeting these metrics, because that site is within a 3-mile radius of a major employment center, whether you link it to the Treasure Coast International Airport or the corridor of Kings Highway with distribution and other jobs, and it would start to meet those metrics of we have paved roadways, we have public utilities readily available, and we have the synergy for mix of uses not far from a high school, not too far from a middle school and elementary school. So that's a site or a potential project that comes to mind that could be a candidate.
So the 3-mile radius though could get you into neighborhoods you don't necessarily would prefer high density in. And if you do this, that live, work, local act thing, that basically like they could come in within 3 miles of a business center and put this in like a more rural suburban neighborhood and ask for higher density, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. Like I'm just trying to find out how is it going to be abused to where we're going to kick ourselves in the butt for saying that this is good, right? Like.
So Chair Benner, I would suggest we work through some of those quick highlights. So limited to the MXD, may include up to 10% for affordable housing. In order to be entitled to the possible incentives outlined, must be located inside the urban service boundary, have available all necessary services and facilities prior to development. The use of the affordable housing must be restricted to households that meet the AMI of 100% or less, within a mixed-use development without market rate dwelling units, must be within 3-mile radius of major employment center as determined by the county, and the dwelling units must be deed restricted for 50 years. And so when we talk about MXD land use amendments, we have an array of MXD areas that are pretty well established and have been around for 3 decades. In theory, they could be part of the potential proposal. But if somebody is looking at exploring a new MXD and has this incentive in mind, through the land use amendment process, we're first and foremost considering our comprehensive plan policies. Is there a comparable density or intensity within a quarter mile to even consider assigning it an MXD? And if so, if we're assigning that MXD, is it at a 5 unit per acre tier, a 9 unit per acre tier, or 15 unit per acre tier? And then that's going to apply the potential 10% ratio.
So it has to be within a quarter mile. Yeah. So they're looking at properties in a quarter mile for density, and the whole goal is to keep it conforming. So you're not going to have a bunch of 3 unit per acre, 4 unit per acre, and then 15, boom, because somebody's doing this thing, right? That wouldn't conform. So that would be a way to make sure you're not putting 15 units right next to 1 acre properties.
Yeah, that quarter mile policy is currently in our comprehensive plan. It exists, and that's how we try to maintain compatibility between different land uses.
Okay.
So my question is, as a board, if we write in 10% up to, well, let's just say they're at a 5 unit per acre, and we would actually give them 15% or 18% because it's a lower density, maybe on a smaller, bigger project, is that going to be, should we lock it at 10% or should we leave it to a discretionary bonus?
I mean, I'd say whatever we motion, I would just say motion it to the board to maybe work with staff and see maybe like if they could work out a tiered structure for longer terms, gives you a higher percentage or
Right.
something like that. Like we can motion that, like, because we're just recommending it, so we could throw numbers at it or just say we recommend approval, but we'd like to see maybe them explore a tiered option and present that to the commissioners and let them do it, and we can motion to
I
for
love
their
his
approval
idea.
type of thing. I don't know enough to say like 10, 20, I don't want to put a number on it
Right,
just
right,
because I
that's what
wouldn't
I'm
know
saying,
yet.
yeah.
But maybe just if we motion it, it would direct staff to maybe look into that, present different options of tiering it with longer terms, with higher densities. So when they go to the commissioners, they would at least have that data based on our recommendation, and that'd be something for the county commissioners to chew on.
And Larry, you brought up, just a total across the board. Or would you be okay with like a 4 out of 5, or do you want it just a non?
I would have to be unanimous.
Yeah,
Unanimous
okay.
for me. I mean, if we're going to make that big of a concession, they need to all be on board.
I mean, I agree. It needs to be 95% at bare minimum. You know, I mean, I was only, I thought maybe 4 out of 5, but I like unanimous too. You know, I just hate to find ourselves in a predicament where it's maybe a 5 unit, and we would have given them a little bit more, but we're locked into a up to law.
I like that it's all workforce housing, but I do agree like 10% on 5 units an acre, depending on the size of the project. It's really like, if I'm a developer, that's not gonna incentivize me much, but.
And if you look at the rest of that sentence, it's not just the density. We've also included that potentially they can get additional lot coverage, maybe reduction in parking, other dimensional standards, maybe it's slightly less setback or a little bit more height or whatever else. So we've tried to put in some flexibility there for when you're reviewing in the future, you have the option of recommending in that suite of options.
You just can't block the Bucky sign. Mr. Lowndes.
Mr. Belser, in this proposal, there is a stipulation, it must be deed restricted. What is that concerned with?
The deed restriction would ensure that it is tied for a specific income for that number of specified years. So if it's a 50-year deed restriction, it has to be rented or sold to an individual that meets that income criteria of 100% or less of the area median income.
It prevents the developer from changing it 5 years from now?
Correct.
Okay.
It locks it in for that number of years.
And that's what we're saying. If they do a longer year, maybe we'll give them a little bit more than 10%, depending on the project, things like that.
I'd like to remind the board that we are in the throes also in the county of looking at impact fees. When you talk about affordable housing, I don't think a developer can build a house that will return the money in taxes to the county that will offset the impact that development has over a period of time without the amount of impact fees that staff is asking for. I think it takes someplace north of $300,000 before the county begins to get money back from a house. And that may be conservative in today's cost of what the impact fees are supposed to cover. We're not politicians up here. We're not elected. We don't have to worry about getting back on the board. We make recommendations for 100%. We've already got a few commissioners that say, I don't know about that. Impact fees affect this, and this affects what we get out of impact fees. I relate impact fees like taking quinine to get over malaria, and I made this statement at the Citizens Budget Committee last week. Quinine helps the patient that has malaria. It does nothing to stop the spread of malaria because it doesn't hurt the mosquito. Impact fees only helps relieve the pressure that's created by dense population and more housing. I think someplace along the line, the impact fees and what we're asking for here has a definite relationship. No, we can't build $500,000 homes, but I don't think you can put a $500,000 home on a 40-foot lot. I don't think that's possible. So the more dense we get with 40-foot lots, the more we got to have a more realistic impact fees. Now, I don't know where those two lines cross and we get out of all the problems of impact fees in this. I know we need affordable housing. We need the people that come here and help us work. But I don't know that I am real comfortable with all that I see of this. I think you've got some good ideas. I think giving them some leeway in that 10% may be feasible. But I think my other question, Mr. Belser, are there any things that you and staff, in looking through all this, and I know you all have studied this thing like the Bible, is there anything else in this that brings you some concern that this board needs to review before we open it up? Any other areas of this?
So, Chair Benner, Commissioner Lowndes, so this has been a year in the making, this evaluation and appraisal review. We started this last September, October. Through that time frame, statutes have changed, specifically Senate Bill 180. When we were going through this, we were recommending certain restrictions and regulations that may have been looked at as more restrictive. And then we were told by the legislature, well, you can't do that at this point in time because you were impacted by a hurricane. And that takes into effect, I guess it was in 2024, it's retroactive, all the way to October 1st of 2027. We can't adopt any new land development code regulations or comprehensive plan amendments that could be looked at as more burdensome or limiting on development. So we had to take a look and actually comb through the certain elements and staff's recommended changes and take a lot of that stuff out because we legally cannot move forward with recommending those policy updates. So what you have in front of you right now is really pared down. It is strictly statutory, like mandated statutory updates and policies that the Board of County Commissioners are actively working on. Our housing needs assessment is in there because the board adopted that in 2024. Our vulnerability assessment that our board just adopted in June of 2025 is referenced in there. So things that the county is actively working on and where our board's priorities are, those are reflected in our updated policies. But other than that, there's really not a lot of impactful changes to our comprehensive plan that we're recommending for you tonight.
Chair Benner,
Go ahead, Mr. Benner.
if I may add to that, Commissioner Lowndes, was noted by the presenters, one of the most notable policy components that this body has been tracking relates to the 2022 expansion of the urban service boundary and the provision for assessment of that central and northern county expansion area, and that it doesn't make any changes to the urban service boundary as established, and it projects out when we would revisit that and evaluate it further. I think that's certainly of note.
So as a whole, you all, as staff and as director, are comfortable with this?
Yes, sir. This is our recommended changes are before you today.
I have always been leery of state, federal mandates.
Mr. Bradley.
And it may be off topic. Maybe have the answer, maybe you don't. The affordable housing, if somebody built one of these projects and we gave them X amount of dollars, does the property tax coincide? Let's just say they sold it off and it has to meet X amount of dollars for the housing. Does the property tax weigh in on that, or does it just fluctuate as it feels with the surrounding areas with that deed restriction?
Commissioner Bradley, unless there are adoptions of ad valorem tax abatement or incentive programs, and we understand it would be assessed based upon the property appraiser's calculation, but deed restrictions, conservation areas, things like that, go into that equation when they consider the market value of a property, the land itself. So I imagine they would factor in that assignment of a deed restriction, knowing that it can't be sold to high-income buyers.
I figured you had the answer.
So,
Mr. Gettler?
TVC, I noticed we added some zoning uses to the TVC, future land use. Basically, why and how do you see those things trickling down into the LDRs?
Yeah, commissioners will pull open those most notable exhibits related to the TVC updates. And so for the most part, I think these modifications to the policies account for some of the adjustments with St. Lucie County Utilities investment in the North County region, how we're transitioning our relationship and consumption and use of water produced by the Fort Pierce Utilities Authority, and then accounting for the evaluation of the TVC element that was conducted by the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, and some of the adjustments that occurred related to the adoption of alternative development forms such as a hamlet, which are currently well established in our TVC element now. Again, some qualifications here that the flowway design and that aspirational goal, of course, has to be of regulatory compliance with the South Florida Water Management District, the Fort Pierce Farms Water Control District, and so forth. So that's accounted for. And then, of course, the most notable relates to recent changes in our county's thoroughfare protection plan. And we can make sure it's on screen for you, my apologies, that when the TVC element was adopted, it identified a future street network. It laid out those primary arterials and those major corridors that the county indicated were absolutely necessary as the community in this North County region were to grow as baseline infrastructure, not taking the place of private development streets and internal connections between neighborhoods and commercial goods and services, but those major roadways. And as we've encountered development proposals, we've looked at environmental assessments, we've observed changes in the marketplace, demand needs. This is refining and updating what's already essentially been studied, adopted in our land development code, as well as part of our other maps in the comprehensive plan. So it merges and refines it, and you can see some of the adjustments and alignment.
So do those new zoning codes still have to abide by the TVC elements?
Yes, there's no specific alterations of what somebody can propose or how they can propose development in the TVC. There was arguably an update to a prior Scrivener's error in which if somebody has pre-existing agricultural 1 zoning, it makes it clear that that is consistent and compatible with the TVC land use should they want to continue uses under that zoning district or propose a subdivision under the terms of that zoning district.
But that's just for the Ag 1, isn't it?
Ag 1 and AR1.
AR1 too. Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Neese, did you have something?
No, this is probably just more for talk, but since Josh was talking about it a minute ago, have you guys put any thought to what happens if they actually eliminate property tax? I mean, because it's possible. I'm just curious. It'd be amazing. There wouldn't be a grain of sand that wouldn't be sold in a minute.
I think that's just something that I think that the county and the county administrators are grappling with, and what the overall impact will be. Has it filtered down to the department level? Yeah, we've thought about it. Nothing relevant here in this, but yes, we have discussed it.
Commissioner, I might ask to come work and learn how to construct a roof.
Right.
I got a question about TVC. It says in there that because the whole thing with TVC, they wanted the connected flowing waterways, and it says in there on 11.1.421 that basically connecting those unified flowways not feasible. So basically, is that in the TVC not going to have connected flowways, we're gonna have closed off interior ponds, interior
I'll take that there, Corey. Chair Benner, the TVC, and I think Corey alluded to this before, had an aspirational goal of having stormwater ponds from one development connect to a stormwater pond in another development. They call it a flowway. What we found in practice is now that we're actually seeing some of these developments come through with actual engineered plans, that it's not very feasible to, if Corey and I had neighboring properties that I have to account for his stormwater for his development, that I don't know what he's going to build, and with my development. Those things might not be permitted by those regulating agencies. And so we're just saying with this change that that the flowway system can be linked between developments if it's able to be permitted by those South Florida Water Management Districts and Fort Pierce Farms. It was an aspirational goal, I think, whenever it was developed. Obviously it looks good and all of that, but in functionality it might not work with our permitting agencies.
So we're moving forward with the idea that they're not going to be linked with neighboring properties. We'll be linked to the canal system that's up there, would be the new flowway, if you will.
Yeah, I think, Commissioner, that's essentially what we're stating. On one hand, you could have a large-scale master development, something in the nature of tradition, where it makes sense, where CDD or another entity is dedicated to those stormwater systems, and they're interconnected, and they do travel from the commercial node to a residential or civic node. Whereas when we have developments like a Buc-ee's or the Indra 995, where they have balanced abutting borders, that you would anticipate control structures and from an aesthetic and a multimodal standpoint of bike ridership and pedestrians, it would be one fluid green corridor open space where it's contextually appropriate, but you wouldn't, the hydrological connectivity would be through engineered design controlled structures, not open water flow.
Gotcha.
Mr. Lowndes.
The other point with the waterways that connecting, and we argued this years ago when we started to talk about the TVC huts, hovels, and pup tents, was that piece of land up there is not pool table level, and there's reasons there's pumps in that water management district. You can't connect and have general flow of water from one to the other in most of those areas without having to alter the flow by pumping it. And that interrupts the whole concept of the general flow of a waterway. I'm glad to see this provision being eliminated.
And I got a question on a different topic. Transportation. It says, if I'm reading it right, on the transportation portion, I think this is the 4th page of our presentation, it says that the peak hour is basically like D and E, unless you're multi-lane rural, and that the level of service has to basically have a minimum of D. And you'll allow level of service of E as long when there's development going or something that might improve it. Increasing the level of service higher than D, which when I was in school was failing, would be considered restrictive. If we wanted to have a minimum of C's, I know we have a past school teacher in the audience. I mean, if he had D students, I don't think they'd keep their jobs. But
Chair Benners, members of the commission, I'm trying to find that slide, and maybe
it's not on the slide, it's on the packet.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I don't think we're proposing any modifications to those particular standards. We do add some additional context to the policy.
We were considering trying to amend that, but when Senate Bill 180 came through, it would be more restrictive because as you increase that level of service, they have to account for that increase, and we can't do that at this stage.
So that whole Senate bill, we can't be restrictive, but they can be destructive to us, and we just have to eat it.
We have to follow state law, and that's what it is.
All right. So after that sunsets in 27, is there plans or anything to come back and revisit some of the stuff that we can't, that you said you guys were already planning some stuff that was restrictive you had to strip out of this? Is there plans to revisit this comp plan? Because that's outside of the 7 years to address the restrictive things and maybe address, because some of the sprawl and development, if we change it from a level of service D to a level of service C, would either require more investments into the roadways to develop out those areas, because right now they can be like, well, it's level D, so we can do it, you can't stop us. Like, at least put another arrow in our quiver to try and balance it out a little bit.
Absolutely. Our goal was definitely to do it this time. We couldn't. We have our list of items that we'd love to tackle in 2027. We can't speak to what the legislature may do between that time or this time and that time. Who knows, in 2027, they may adopt it again and say you can't do anything further till 2030. We don't know that. But we have that list and we know what we'd like to do. Not only would it be harder for them to meet that standard, but it'll also be, just to be honest, it'll be harder for us, because that means we have to add more lanes and everything else to add that capacity to meet that level of service, which again is a balancing of policy, because there's a cost to them, but there's also a cost to us.
Okay. And then the city of PSL always comes here and complains anytime a house is built in the county. There's just like a paragraph in there that we have to cooperate with them. Is there any way that this can expand that cooperation, so every time the county does a house, we're not the devil, but the city of PSL can annex and blow out as many houses as they want? And
If one of the other people want to pull up the intergovernmental element, we can go through that. You are welcome to try to suggest changes.
well, I don't
Obviously,
even
we
know what,
can't.
I don't know what changes it is, but is there like
We're
a
going
way
to pull
to
it up so we
improve-
can go through it. It's already on the desktop.
Is there like a common sense box somewhere
Yeah,
we can
like-
start
And
checking?
it's hard for us. You can't. We can come to the table, but we can't force somebody to do something.
Yeah.
We
It just
share
feels like they
information.
come here and they just say, you guys are the bad guy, you didn't talk to us, and like, if it says we got to talk, like, why is it not happening? Like, to me, before it even comes here, like, there should have been some sort of agreement, not, well, we were blindsided, we had no idea, this is going to hurt us, which I
So-
get. So, like, if we got to change policy to maybe talk sooner, whatnot, like,
I will let you know that we talk all the time.
okay.
And the second that a development project comes in, we have a development review email blast that goes out. They are copied on it. I think there's at least 7 or 8 members of the planning or their team on that. So the second we get it and distribute it, they receive it. We have coordination meetings, we have phone calls, we have emails. So not everything that is stated may be as accurate as it seems.
And like their modeling for traffic analysis, it's the same you guys are doing. I mean, it's not like they're using different math than you guys. So
We
right?
believe they are using different math at this stage for their mobility study.
Okay.
Same way they do their.
There's no way to
Their
standardize
criminal
that.
reports.
Like, I mean, since we're all into the same tent here of saying this, like, there's no way that for both cities and the county to figure that out.
Chair Benner, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, good evening. I'm Patrick Diane, I'm the Public Works Director. Regarding when development projects come in and the analysis comes in for the impact of that new traffic loading onto the network, I can share with you that we do share consistent methodology. There's a standard implementation practice that was adopted by our TPO. We all pull from that. So the city adopted it, the county adopted it, so we all play from the same playbook regarding how we analyze that traffic. But when, as Maite was saying, with this current mobility plan, we believe that there's a different approach, different methodology that's being used by the city versus the multimodal feed that the county is currently looking at for the roadway impacts based on the overall global growth of the area and the projected growth of the area.
Okay, and there's nowhere in this with the data portion or the GOP portion to like improve the methodology between the two entities, so maybe they're less showing up with letters and not liking each other? Can we just get is there a way to, anything that can be changed in this to make everybody play nicer? Or is this not even part of this?
I'm not sure that this document is necessarily going to help play nice. We continue to share information. We continue to reach out. We have meetings with their elected members, with our elected members. We have meetings between administration and their administration. We have meetings between our planning and development and their planning and zoning, their traffic and our traffic. Like I said, we share things immediately as soon as we get it. They are on the same distribution list as everybody else. I I think Patrick and Ben probably talk to them every other week, if not more. So it's a little hard to say that any language in here may require anything. As again, we share as much as we can. We try to be at the table, but they also have to be at the table too.
Okay. And then one last thing, when it comes to, does the comp plan address the notice distance or anything like that? That's already been taken care of, that nothing in here has to do with like within the 500 or 1,000 feet, that's not considered restrictive, nothing like that, right?
So that's in your land development code, and that was adopted a couple months ago. I forget the date.
Yeah.
We are watching that because that Senate Bill 180 is retroactive to 2024. Technically, a developer could come, or some other resident, and say, I don't want to do that. You've now required me to do a greater notice than I had to do before that date. We are hopeful that that does not occur, because we took actions before it went into effect, not knowing that Senate Bill 180 was going to go into effect, but technically somebody could still challenge it. But there's nothing included in the comprehensive plan for noticing.
Okay, cool.
I have a question. If you guys have done everything you've done, sent everything to the city, they disagree with your study, your whatever it may be, what's the next level? Do you bring the state in? Is there a requirement to bring the state in?
There's not a requirement to bring the state in. There's typically some mediation process through the Regional Planning Council that you try to do in terms of trying to come to the table. Usually it leads to litigation, and typically as you're going through that process, the judge will say, we'll try to get you to the table to mediate and settle as well, but there's no guarantee on that either.
So you're telling me you're just riding a carousel, that's what you're doing? Spin your wheels going in circles.
We are doing our jobs.
So one time the state could get involved and do something good, right? Well, maybe do something good.
Maybe. Who knows?
Maybe do something good.
Any other questions for staff?
Sure, I got one more question. When do LDRs and engineering standards and everything get updated to be consistent with this once this goes into effect? When is that process going to take place?
Usually
and do we see that up here? Is that all handled? Okay.
Usually it's about a year after you do your comprehensive plan, because it takes you about a year to write your comp plan, and then about a year to do your land development code. Again, there's not a lot of substantive change within this update because we were restricted in that. So we will go around and check to see what needs to be updated in the code. That process always comes before you because it's part of the policy that's, you know, part of the county, part of that code, and you're one of the pieces of that public hearing process.
Is it required to be updated, or in theory, if there was no substantial changes, you could just...
So if there's nothing that's inconsistent, you don't have to update. If there is an inconsistency, you're required by state law to update within 1 year.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any other questions for staff? All right, this is a public hearing. We'll go ahead and open up to the public for any comment on the agenda item. Seeing nobody from the public, we will close the public hearing, come back to the board for discussion and/or a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Adele.
If there's no further discussion, I have a motion.
All right, let's hear it.
Any further? Okay. To approve with all the staff and the board recommendations as discussed.
You what? I'm sorry?
Motion to approve with all the staff and board recommendations as we discussed.
Specifically to Mr. Neese's comment that we have 100% of approval on those objects? Mr. Neese, it was 100% or majority?
Yeah, I don't think that, well, see, there he didn't define whether you have a quorum or not. You know, whether, you know, how many voting members might be present.
Can't have a vote without a quorum.
That's what I'm talking
But
about.
3 is quorum, and if you had 3 vote, that would be considered unanimous, right?
That's right. That would be unanimous. That's what I'm
So it had
talking
to
about.
be
If you had a quorum of
100%.
3, that's all it takes. That would be unanimous.
I'd rather, unanimous means more than a majority.
And it's
To me.
all.
That means all voting members.
Talk about every
Yeah, all
one of them.
voting members.
Make them sweat.
Or 5 out of 5.
Yes, sir.
5 out of 5.
Yeah. And
Was that your intent, Mr. Neese?
Yeah, 3 out of 3, 4 out of 4.
Just as long as they have quorum and it's unanimous.
Yeah, quorum and unanimous.
Okay,
Okay.
let it rip.
All right, so that, we got a motion to approve with all staff and board recommendations as discussed. Is that specific enough?
And I believe the other thing that was discussed was the tiered.
To research and maybe present a tiered thing for higher percentages.
That was pretty much a moot point at that, it's,
Yeah, but are we removing the up to 10%? Or are we adding a tiered bonus to be discretionary by the board?
it was, well, we had the tiered
My
discretion of the
recommendation
board.
would be to have staff just present a tiered option.
Right. So
That's-
eliminate
To
the
the
up
commissioner and
to.
let them chew on it and.
But is that eliminating the 10%?
No.
No, that's how we finalized it. with
So
the
you want to
discussion.
leave the up to 10%, but as a tiered up to 10%?
It's 10% at 50 years right now. So
As an
present the
option.
board with
Yeah, that's
options
the-
of going like maybe a 75 to get 15 and 99 year to go 20, something
Right,
like
so,
that.
but what I'm saying, if this goes into up to 10%, you're saying they're still gonna be able to add tiers after that. Why would you leave the 10% in and just use a tiered bonus system?
I'm just saying just to have staff present to the, because what we do doesn't, it's not like.
Well, yeah.
So just to direct staff to present that option to the board.
Tiered.
So the commissioners know that basically, we're just letting the commissioners know based on our discussion that we're entertaining the idea of higher bonuses if they would extend the term longer. What that would look like, we don't have the knowledge or
Right,
expertise
right.
to suggest, but if staff would research that and present those options when they bring this in front of the commissioners, by then, hopefully the commissioners will have known what our meeting was about, what we said, coupled with maybe meeting with staff and staff presentation, because it's still 2 more presentations on this before it's done, that's just at least, since they introduced the 10%, and we were saying, well, maybe if they do longer, we could do more, let's
So
start the
to
ball,
leave
the
that
conversation
Again,
roll, and
that
let
was
them
the
figure
board
it out.
recommendation.
Yeah, okay, I get what you're saying.
Okay.
I didn't know if you had to have one or the other is what I'm saying.
No, just let them dig, we're just giving direction to like, start, dig into that a little
Yeah.
bit, you know?
Still need a second.
You guys,
Cool.
just more things for you to do.
So we got a motion to approve. Do we have a
Second.
second? Motion to approve by Mr. Adele, second by Mr. Lowndes. Can we call the roll? Por favor.
Commissioner Lowndes? Commissioner Lowndes?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Odell?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Neese?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Gettler? Commissioner Chair Binner?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, what does tomorrow night look like,
Paul.
since I don't get emails anymore?
Yes, we have at least 3. What about the commerce, the industrial?
Chair Benner, members of the commission, we do have quite a few items on the docket tomorrow evening. One of the items that has been continued since the June meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission, known as the Fort Pierce Commerce Center, which has joint petitions for a future land use map amendment and a planned non-residential development, where we've received correspondence that they will be requesting an additional continuance as they continue to negotiate a replacement easement for access to an abutting property. That would leave us with a county-initiated land development code text amendment regarding milestone guidelines. Then we would have a land development code text amendment prepared by the private sector related to alcohol sales in the commercial neighborhood as a conditional use, an associated conditional use permit that's coupled with that request. Then those 2 items proposed for continuance of the Fort Pierce Commerce Center. Then we do have a conditional use petition for a sand mine within the Agricultural 5 zoning district. And we also have a petition for rezoning of approximately 44 acres of property on North 25th Street, east of the Airport Industrial Park, previously owned by Dickerson. So,
Bring some snacks.
Bring a sandwich.
Yes.
And your sleeping bag.
All right, so no workshops. Do we have any other business? Being none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, so moved. See you guys tomorrow.